Let me begin with a truth that very few doctors say out loud. Memory loss is not a normal part of aging. It is a nutritional and neurological decline that happens when the brain stops getting what it needs to stay alive. Yes, the brain changes with age. Yes, neurons slow down. But the reason some people stay mentally sharp into their 80s and 90s while others begin losing names, words, and recall in their 60s is not genetics alone. It's whether the brain is being protected or unprotected. I've met seniors who told me, "I feel like my mind is slipping," and others the same age who say, "I may not move like I used to, but my brain is still fast." The difference was not luck. It was nutrition. Because the brain is not like the heart or liver. It cannot store its vitamins. Whatever it doesn't receive daily, it loses. And once those nutrients are chronically low, the brain begins shrinking, inflammation builds, and mental clarity fades little by little until people assume it's just old age. But the brain at 60, 70, even 80 is still capable of repairing neurons, forming new memories, and building new brain pathways, as long as it is given the right fuel. And there are 5 specific vitamins that matter more than all the others when it comes to memory strength, cognitive speed, and long-term protection against dementia and brain aging. Before we continue, let me ask you, where are you watching from? I'd love to know which part of the world you're tuning in from. And also, what's one healthy habit you never skip in your daily routine? Share it with us in the comments below. Number 5, vitamin D. Most people still think of vitamin D as the bone vitamin, but if you're over 60, vitamin D is just as important for your memory, mood, thinking speed, and long-term brain health. In fact, studies now show that seniors deficient in vitamin D are twice as likely to experience accelerated memory loss. Not because the brain is old, but because without vitamin D, the brain loses its ability to protect and repair itself. Here's what happens inside the body. When vitamin D levels drop, inflammation inside the brain rises, blood flow decreases, and the neurons, the brain cells responsible for storing and recalling memory, begin to shrink and fire more slowly. This is why so many older adults feel mentally slower in winter, indoors, or during long periods without sunlight. What people describe as brain fog is often a vitamin D deficiency in disguise. What makes this even more serious is that the body becomes far less efficient at making vitamin D after age 60. Even if you go outside, the skin doesn't convert sunlight into usable vitamin D the way it used to. That is why almost every senior who gets tested ends up in the deficient or insufficient range, and most don't find out until memory symptoms have already begun. Vitamin D is involved in over 200 brain functions, including the production of neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin, the chemicals that regulate memory, motivation, focus, and emotional balance. When vitamin D is low, these signals weaken. When vitamin D is restored, people often describe the brain feeling awake again, like someone finally turned the lights back on. I've seen seniors go from forgetting conversations and losing words mid-sentence to speaking clearly and confidently again just by correcting a vitamin D deficiency. Not because vitamin D is magic, but because the brain cannot stay sharp without it. That's why it ranks number 5. Not the strongest vitamin on this list, but the one that decides whether the brain is protected or exposed. And if the brain is unprotected, no other vitamin can fully compensate. Number 4, vitamin B12. If there is one vitamin deficiency I see most often in seniors with memory issues, slowed thinking, numbness, or mood changes, it is vitamin B12. And the most shocking part? Many of them had no idea they were deficient. Because B12 doesn't cause pain, it causes silent nerve damage before symptoms finally appear. Vitamin B12 is the vitamin that protects your myelin sheath, the coating around brain and nerve cells that keeps signals moving quickly. When B12 is low, that protective coating begins to thin, and the brain loses speed, not because the brain cells have died, but because they can no longer communicate properly. That's when people start saying things like, "I can't remember words as fast as before." Names are harder to recall. My thoughts feel slower. My hands or feet sometimes feel numb. Or even, I feel shaky inside my head. All of these are classic signs of low B12. You don't just need more B12 as you age, you absorb less of it. The stomach slowly produces less acid, and without stomach acid, B12 from food can't be unlocked and used by the body. That's why seniors eating the same foods they always ate can still become deficient. This is also why people on acid reflux medication, diabetes medication, or a low-meat diet are at even higher risk. All of those block B12 absorption even further. Low B12 doesn't just affect memory, it affects balance, sleep, muscle control, mood, and even the ability to speak or think clearly. In fact, many early cases of dementia and Alzheimer's begin with a B12 deficiency that was never corrected. And here's the part that frustrates me. Doctors often check cholesterol, blood pressure, and blood sugar in seniors, but not B12, even though it may be the first cause of brain aging. I've seen people diagnosed with early dementia who did not have dementia. They had a B12 deficiency. Once corrected, many of their symptoms reduced or disappeared. Vitamin B12 helps build neurotransmitters, the messenger chemicals that allow the brain to store and retrieve memories. It supports oxygen delivery to the brain, keeps red blood cells healthy, and prevents the nervous system from breaking down under stress. When B12 is low, the brain becomes underfed and underconnected, like trying to run a computer on a damaged wire. That's why the difference between low B12 and normal B12 is not small. It's the difference between a brain that remembers and a brain that struggles. If you're over 60, never assume you have enough B12. Test it or supplement it, because unlike some vitamins, B12 deficiency doesn't fix itself through diet alone. The body simply doesn't absorb it as well anymore. Once B12 is restored, seniors often report, "My thoughts feel clearer. I don't lose track mid-sentence anymore. My memory feels like it's working again. My energy is back. My mood is better." And it's not because the brain got younger. It's because the nerve pathways finally got fed again. That is why vitamin B12 ranks number 4. Because if the nerves are starving, the brain cannot work, no matter how many puzzles, supplements, or brain exercises someone does. Number 3, omega-3, DHA. Why this vitamin is critical for seniors. If there is one nutrient that directly decides whether the brain stays sharp or slowly declines with age, it is omega-3, especially the DHA form. DHA is not just a supplement or a healthy fat. It is the actual raw material the brain is made of. Nearly 30% of the human brain is DHA fat, and the areas responsible for memory, learning, and communication have the highest concentration of it. That means if DHA is low, the brain can't repair itself, can't build new memory connections, and can't defend itself against inflammation, the same inflammation that leads to dementia and cognitive decline. The body becomes less efficient at converting plant fats into DHA. Even if someone eats nuts, seeds, or vegetable oils, the conversion rate drops dramatically with age, sometimes to as low as 1 to 3%. That means seniors can be eating what they consider a healthy diet and still be severely DHA deficient. A shrinking DHA supply is one of the main reasons brain shrinkage called atrophy speeds up in later life. When DHA levels fall, seniors often notice slower recall of names or words, trouble concentrating, irritability or anxiety without obvious cause, more mental fatigue, difficulty learning new information, feeling emotionally flat or unmotivated. None of those are personality changes. They are nutrient changes happening in the brain. DHA repairs damaged neurons, strengthens the synaptic bridges between brain cells, and keeps the brain's electrical messages traveling smoothly. Without DHA, the brain becomes dry and brittle, meaning it can no longer rebuild itself properly. But when DHA is restored, something incredible happens. The brain begins repairing old connections, building new ones, and controlling inflammation before it damages memory centers. Research has proven this again and again. Seniors with higher DHA intake have up to 50% lower risk of cognitive decline, and even those who already have memory problems often show improvement when DHA is replenished. The little-known brain circulation benefit. Omega-3 doesn't just repair the brain, it improves blood flow to the brain. That means more oxygen, more glucose delivery, more mental clarity. Many seniors think they have a brain problem when really they have a circulation problem in the brain. DHA solves both at the same time. That's why people who start taking DHA often say, "My thinking feels smoother. I feel more alert and less stressed. My memory feels like it's waking up again. I don't feel as overwhelmed by small things anymore." It isn't magic. It's restored brain chemistry. Restored brain chemistry. Number 2, vitamin E. If there is one silent enemy that destroys senior brain cells faster than age alone, it is oxidative stress. The same way metal rusts when exposed to oxygen, your brain cells rust when exposed to free radicals, unstable molecules that damage the brain's fatty tissue. And here's the part nobody tells seniors in time. The brain is the fattiest organ in the entire body, which means it is the most vulnerable organ to this kind of damage. So the question isn't, will the brain age? The real question is anything protecting it while it ages? And that is where vitamin E becomes absolutely crucial, because vitamin E is the main antioxidant that protects brain cells from this rusting effect. Without enough of it, even a healthy brain slowly weakens. Not because it is old, but because it is unprotected. The brain doesn't warn you with pain. It warns you with subtle memory changes. You start forgetting names faster, rereading sentences, losing track in conversations, or struggling to recall simple words. You may feel like the hard drive of your mind is slowing down. That's not normal aging. That's oxidative stress chipping away at neuron function. Most seniors say things like, "I just feel slower mentally than I used to. Things don't stick like before. My brain gets tired too fast. I can remember things from 30 years ago, but not yesterday." These are not personality changes. They are nutritional warning signs. Because once vitamin E is low for too long, the brain starts losing memory cells faster than it can replace them. And that process, if ignored, is what later gets labeled as cognitive decline, dementia, or Alzheimer's, long after the damage is already done. Vitamin E doesn't just support the brain, it defends it. It sits inside the walls of brain cells and blocks inflammation, oxidation, and damage from toxins, poor circulation, stress hormones, and even high blood sugar. This is one of the reasons people with diabetes, heart disease, or chronic inflammation lose memory faster. Their vitamin E is depleted as the body tries to constantly fight internal damage. And here is something powerful most doctors never mention. Vitamin E also improves microcirculation in the brain, the flow of blood through the tiny capillaries that carry oxygen to the memory and learning centers. Without that blood flow, the brain looks like a city with power, but no wiring. There is fuel, but nothing is reaching the cells that need it. That's why seniors who raise their vitamin E intake often describe improvements like, "My thoughts don't feel tangled anymore. I can finish sentences again without searching for words. My brain doesn't feel tired halfway through the day. I feel more emotionally steady, not overwhelmed." Because vitamin E doesn't just protect memory, it protects mood, clarity, emotional balance, and mental stamina. Vitamin E only exists in meaningful amounts in whole, natural fats, nuts, seeds, olive oil, avocados, not in processed, low-fat, high-carb senior diets. The more someone switches to convenience foods or light foods, the more vitamin E disappears. And since the body cannot produce vitamin E on its own, the brain is left completely exposed. That's why researchers found alarmingly low levels of vitamin E in over 90% of seniors already diagnosed with memory loss. Not because their brains were beyond saving, but because nobody protected the brain before the decline began. Number 1. Vitamin B9, folate. If there is one vitamin that has shown the most dramatic results in protecting senior brains, and in some cases even reversing early cognitive decline, it is vitamin B9, also known as folate. Unlike other vitamins that protect or support the brain, folate builds the chemicals the brain needs to think, remember, and stay emotionally balanced. It is the raw material your brain uses to create neurotransmitters, including serotonin, dopamine, and acetylcholine, the very chemicals that control memory, focus, mood, and motivation. And here is the part most people never learn until it's too late. Low folate levels age the brain faster than almost any other deficiency. It doesn't just weaken memory, it shrinks the hippocampus, the part of the brain responsible for learning and storing long-term memories. That is why I call this the brain builder vitamin, and why it holds the #1 spot on this list. Most seniors experience a slow decline in folate levels without noticing because the symptoms appear gradually. Forgetting conversations only hours later. Losing mental energy by late morning. Repeating questions or thoughts. Struggling to learn new information. Feeling flat, depressed, or unmotivated for no reason. People assume these changes are aging, but in reality, these are biochemical changes inside the brain. Changes that can be corrected. Folate is responsible for something called methylation, the process the brain uses to repair DNA, build neurotransmitters, and clear out toxic proteins linked to dementia. When folate is low, the brain struggles to detox itself, meaning damage accumulates faster than the brain can repair it. That's why low folate levels are now being found in the majority of people with memory decline, and even more commonly in adults who later go on to develop dementia. Not because folate would have cured them, but because folate would have slowed the damage long before symptoms appeared. In multiple clinical studies, seniors with memory loss were given daily folate, and many showed improvement in memory speed, mood stability, verbal recall, and focus within just 8 to 12 weeks. Some even experienced increased brain volume in memory center regions, something previously believed to be impossible after 60. That means this isn't just a support vitamin. It is a brain rebuilding vitamin. And unlike vitamin D or E, folate does not just protect the outside of the brain. It gets inside the brain and changes how it functions. Folate exists naturally in foods like leafy greens, beans, liver, asparagus, and avocado. But the aging gut absorbs less of it. Many seniors eat less fresh food and more packaged food. Medications like metformin, PPIs, and blood pressure pills drain folate levels. Seniors who rarely eat greens are almost always deficient. So most adults over 60 are low in folate, not because they don't eat, but because the brain never receives enough. That is why I put vitamin B9, folate, at the top. Because if there is one vitamin that can change the brain instead of just protecting it, this is the one. So now you have the complete list of the 5 most important brain protection vitamins for seniors, in descending order. Vitamin D protects brain cells and supports memory chemistry. Vitamin B12 powers nerve communication and prevents cognitive slowdown. Omega-3 DHA rebuilds brain structure and improves blood flow. Vitamin E shields memory cells from oxidative aging and inflammation. Vitamin B9, folate, repairs the brain at a cellular level and restores neurotransmitters. These are not optional. These are not nice to have. These are the vitamins the brain requires to stay alive, sharp, and connected after 60. People do not lose memory because they are old. They lose memory because the brain stops receiving what it needs to function. The good news? You don't need a perfect diet. You don't need expensive supplements. You don't need to accept decline as your future. All you need is to protect the brain before it's too late and feed it what makes it grow instead of shrink. Because staying mentally sharp after 60 isn't luck. It's nutritional strategy. And now, you know the strategy. Your brain is still alive. It is still repairable. And starting today, it is still yours to protect. Still yours to protect.